Hallo, in diesem Video wollen wir uns mit Jake Barber befassen. Das ist ein neuer Whistleblower, der in die Öffentlichkeit getreten ist und einiges kundtut über seine Arbeit als Bergungspilot von bekannten menschlichen nachgebauten Flugobjekten mehr oder weniger, als auch komplett unbekannten Flugobjekten, die von auswärts kommen. Und dazu wollen wir uns mehr auf den Inhalt vor allem konzentrieren, weil gegen die Person einfach zu schießen, tut man dann, wenn man mit dem Thema nicht umgehen kann in der Regel. Und das widerlegt es irgendwas zum Inhalt. Deswegen wollen wir uns vor allem auf den Inhalt konzentrieren, aber wo erforderlich auch eben auf die Person Bezug nehmen, wenn da irgendwelche Auffälligkeiten doch vorhanden sind. Dazu will ich auch von Michael Herrera und von Dr. Stephen Greer ein paar kleinere Ausschnitte auch mit einbringen. Aber vor allem ist es das Interview von Jake Barber, um das es hier geht. Und dazu wollen wir jetzt mal Jake Barber selber zu Wort kommen lassen und erstmal vorstellen, was er da in seinem Job eigentlich tut und für wen er diesen Job getan hat oder vielleicht auch heute noch in irgendeiner Weise tut.
I was getting my pilot's training. I was also working to set up a number of businesses in order to pursue government contracts from the DOI, the DOD, and all the organizations and departments within those. And mostly what we did, a lot like in the 90s, the cover capacity takes up the most of your time is spent operating in the cover capacity.
So you were working in legitimate businesses, earning a living like everybody else?
Like everyone else.
You're just waiting for the call.
Waiting for the call. The incidental benefits of the capabilities of the companies you set up are those benefits that are on standby to be deployed in the subject matter of UAPs.
So you've set up all those legitimate businesses. When did you get the call?
So as a helicopter operator, we provide a number of services to a number of departments within the military industrial complex. So know of circumstances, and you'll speak to some of my teammates here, where we did recover things that were exotic in nature in the sky, and we know they were classified craft, and we recovered them and took them back to where they go, and that was a regular thing.
So there are things that we're trying to protect that are far beyond what we know about publicly.
Yeah, much like everything in my story that we're talking about, 80 to 90% of the time, it's very ordinary and boring once you get acclimated to the lifestyle. It's but for a 5 or 10% that is the most outrageous and exciting time of your life. But the majority of what we see and do is explainable and is ordinary and is known by many people and is not classified. But there is a certain percentage which is extremely sensitive, and that extremely sensitive bit does include what we know is our own man-made advanced technology. And we work to our recovery efforts, if this is where we're going with the conversation, when we look at a recovery mission or a crash recovery team, you don't put together a team like that with the intent of recovering non-human craft. That team is trained and provided the training and tools and technology to conduct a recovery mission for a number of objects and craft. But in the rare occasion, or let's say the hypothetical occasion, something of a non-human origin or source were to interface with the ground, you would deploy that same team. And that is the segue in how we got involved with this particular subject.
So tell me about the moment when you realized that you were involved in a retrieval of non-human technology, alien tech.
So it became very clear the first time we recovered something that was non-human in origin that was precisely what we were dealing with. Our communications changed. Our communication process and procedure was modified. It was also clear to everyone on the team that what we were dealing with was something that was unexpected versus expected. And then just visually looking at the object on the ground, you could tell that it was extraordinary and anomalous. It was not human.
You have what's called, I understand, a top secret SCI clearance. You have compartmented intelligence clearance to certain programs.
My clearance is given like on as an as needed basis. So like when I go, it's not like I go, there's no record of me having top secret clearance anywhere, but I get dispatched.
Well, there is, because in the documents that you've showed us, there is one document that shows a NATO top secret clearance. And what does that mean?
That means you are cleared to the highest level that you need to be in order to function in the capacity that you've been assigned on a particular mission.
And it's quite a high clearance?
It's a very high clearance.
Im nachfolgenden Interview erzählt Jake Barber vor allem von zwei verschiedenen UFO-Bergungen. Und beim ersteren geht es um ein eiförmiges UFO. Und dazu lassen wir ihn auch erstmal selber zu Wort kommen.
How close did you get?
Well, I was a helicopter pilot, and I operate with 150-foot to 200-foot long line. So I got within 150 feet of this object.
What did you see?
I saw an egg, a white egg.
How large was the object?
I would say approximately 20 feet, plus or minus a little bit, about the size of a large SUV.
Did it have any seams?
No.
What? And it was pure white?
It was like pearly white, like a metallic pearly white, the best I could assess. In addition to that, it has also been verified by me, by high-ranking members of the UAP task force, that what we recovered that night was in fact known NHI craft.
Das Video zeigt nicht dieselbe Aufnahme, von der Jake Barber spricht, sondern diese Aufnahme kommt von einem anderen Bergungsteam. Und in dem Fall zeigt es eben nicht das gleiche Objekt, was Jake Barber gesehen hat.
In this particular instance, what's very important is that there's a group of whistleblowers who have worked directly on these retrieval programs and in other areas. And for example, that particular footage of this egg-shaped object, which they are saying is non-human extraterrestrial. We know that there are definitely small extraterrestrial life forms that are on the order of a couple to 3.5 feet tall that travel in these very pearlescent, it's not just white paint. When you said pearlescent craft, it's a very unusual material. And they're not very big, 20, 25 feet across. But if you're only 3 feet tall or something, that's a nice, it'd be like me being in a 40-foot diameter disc, because I'm 6'4". So I think that we know that is a type of NHI craft or ET craft. Now, where it gets a little confusing is that in the show, they said this is like the one captured by the Navy pilots that was white. But see, this is the lack of research and knowledge by the producers. That craft was from the Lockheed Skunk Works and man-made.
Everyone involved was convinced that what we were seeing and dealing with was, in fact, exotic in its origin. I will also tell you that during this process over the last couple of years, it's been confirmed to me by ranking members of the UAP task force that what we were working with that night was in fact NHI, and it was not a unique experience. The egg, as we're referring to, is known by, and there have been many others that have encountered this type of craft in our atmosphere, outside of our atmosphere, broad day, nighttime, all over the place.
You got a good look at this object, didn't you?
Yeah.
Was there any visible propulsion system on it?
No, not what we would know. There's no engine, there was no thermal signature. I was operating at night when I finally came in to pick it up, so I'm working under night vision goggles at the time. And it was quite clear. I flipped them up, flipped them down, and looked at it a couple of different ways.
Was there a thermal signature?
There was not a thermal signature.
So it wasn't hot?
No.
Und wie es so der Zufall will, habe ich zufällig eigene Bildaufnahmen. Die sind in Bad Soden am Taunus gemacht worden. Und zwar einmal von einem Objekt, das wie ein Ei ausschaut oder wie ein Tic-Tac. Ich hielt es anfangs für ein Tic-Tac. Hab's auch auf die Größe von einem Auto etwa oder vielleicht mal einem LKW bestenfalls eingeordnet. Und es war allerdings recht hoch unterwegs, so dass die Aufnahmen nur eben einen etwas ovalen Punkt darstellen, Lichtpunkt. Aber ich kann nur versichern, das war kein Stern, das Ding bewegte sich, es war auch kein Satellit, dafür war es zu deutlich und zu klar. Nur mit dem Auge war es besser noch etwas erkennbar als einfach mit der Handykamera. Aber es bewegte sich natürlich und war natürlich auch leise, dass man da auf die Distanz zwar eh kaum was hören würde, aber letztlich war es auch definitiv kein Flugzeug. Und das andere Objekt, auch in Bad Soden aufgenommen zu einer etwas früheren Zeit, war nach meinem Eindruck wie ein Zeppelin. Also das heißt, es schwebte lautlos quasi einfach dahin. So war mein Eindruck dazu zumindest. Ich habe es auch nicht für sehr groß eingeschätzt. Vielleicht etwas größer als ein normales Auto, sage ich mal. Aber es war sicherlich kein großes Objekt wie ein Stadion nach meiner Einschätzung und war auch nicht ganz so sehr hoch. Was aber auffällig ist, ist einmal so ein dunklerer Ring da drinnen, wenn man das genauer anschaut. Und die Ecken sieht man auch. Ob es 6 oder 8 Ecken sind, da würde ich mich jetzt nicht festlegen wollen. Aber auch das ist eine Aufnahme von mir in Bad Soden aufgenommen am Taunus.
There's another craft that we recovered that I can talk about, and that craft was what we referred to as an eight-gon. An eight-gon is basically a disc-shaped object that, when viewed from the top, has 8 different symmetrical sections that are delineated by some form of ridge.
So it's an octagon-shaped disc.
Yes.
What, by any chance, was there a name, a nickname for the egg?
Yeah, the egg we actually called nanus, like from the Mork and Mindy show from the 70s. This is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life I'm about to share with you, so bear with me. This is, for me, when it became clear. As I get closer to this pic site, I start feeling odd. I start feeling extremely emotional. And the closer I get, the more the emotion starts to overwhelm me. And
What do you feel? What's the emotion?
I feel a sense of my mother. I don't know how else to explain it. I feel this intense hybrid of sadness and happiness and beauty and song. And it was very disruptive to me because I had a very practical responsibility at the time to operate a helicopter in the mountains at night. And I began wondering what was wrong with me. It was late. I'm like, am I just stressed? Am I tired? Am I marinating in cortisol and estrogen? I don't know. But as I came over this object for the pic, there was this overwhelming sense of emotion.
What's it saying? The object. Tell me what you're feeling.
Like I said, it was an overwhelming sense of sadness, happiness.
Is it your feeling? Are you suddenly having a mental breakdown on the job?
No, I felt like something connected with me. I felt like something had tuned in to me and my soul and was providing me some sense of guidance on what to do and how profound what I was doing was. And it was so overwhelming that I began to cry. And
I can't imagine crying at night time with night vision goggles is the healthiest way to fly a chopper.
no, it is not. And then I'm confused as to why I'm crying at the same time. And then do I abort the mission? So I just did my best to focus on my particular cues when doing this type of work, and I got the load hooked up and I began flying away. And once it was just me and that object in between the pick and the drop site, there was about 20 miles in between, I felt like something was inside of me. I felt like I was possessed by the most beautiful spirit I'd ever been possessed by. And
Was it loving?
it was loving. But there was a sense of sadness at the same time. And
Had you ever had an experience like this before?
no, it was a very feminine energy, I'll tell you that. It felt like the spirit of God, but not in any masculine sense that I had ever felt. It was like, again, the feeling of my mother and my daughter and beauty. And it wasn't like a soul, it was like a frequency that I was connected with.
Was it scared?
I don't know if it is a thing. I'm still trying to figure out why that happened. I don't want to say that because I have a pretty good idea of what's going on now. And whatever that force was since that night, it has stayed with me. And as crazy as this sounds, it's what's guiding me now. And it's what's providing protection for me.
It's changed your life.
It's changed my life.
Do you think it's made you a better person, that experience?
It has made me a more sensitive and aware person, which I think all of us would be better people.
So that was a moment when you became aware of, at the very least, a technology that had the capacity to touch you remotely,
Remotely,
telepathically.
telepathically.
Now, telepathy, we are told, is a nonsense. It's a fiction. So what happened after you flew the object in the sling to presumably the drop-off zone?
Once I made the drop, before I got there, I was really scared that I was going to have to stop flying and punch this thing off because I was so distracted. But then I was like, well, crap, now we've got another recovery site. Now we're going to have to recover this. I'm going to have to emergency land. I don't know. So it took everything I had in me at the time to get to my drop site, and I delivered this. Oddly enough, no one in my crew reported having similar effects from this. I do not believe there was a being in that craft. I've come to understand now, after being involved with other parts of the programs that are tested on the range, that there is a known and researched and implemented emotional or psychic, or what we call a psionic component to the research and development of the UAP program.
Something made you connect with that machine that night.
Yes, it chose to connect with me. So this was something pretty new to me this night. The last thing I'm going to do is go back and tell my team that I almost had to pop the load off because I was connected with a goddess that was making me cry.
So you've had those two anomalous incidents with craft.
Yeah.
Clearly, these are objects that are being recovered that do not appear to be human technology.
So this is a good thing to talk about because what we're dealing with is either non-human intelligence, if we want to use those words or that phrase or that acronym. It's either that or we need to dramatically redefine what we think human intelligence is.
Because this object, whatever it was capable of communicating with you in your mind.
That object, or whatever was controlling that object, was also connecting to me through the mind, through my mind.
Now you learned, didn't you, that this was the tip of an iceberg. It wasn't
Correct.
just you.
Correct.
What did you learn?
Well, my work, coincidentally, shortly after that, led me in support of another particular part of the program, which deals directly with looking at this piece right here, which is is there a component on the summoning side that we call and the operation side of these non-human craft that has to do with consciousness, or at least a field of consciousness that perhaps humans can tap into, and maybe all beings in the universe can tap into?
In der Regel zählt oft der erste Eindruck. Vorausgesetzt natürlich, man ist selber ausgeglichen, ausgewogen und urteilsfähig überhaupt in einer Situation, um, sagen wir mal, vernünftig etwas überhaupt einordnen zu können. Und in dem Fall, was er sagt, er hat erstmal eine sehr bewegende emotionale Erfahrung mit dem Objekt, was da geborgen worden ist. Auf der anderen Seite sagt er selber, ja, da waren irgendwie noch psionische Teams dabei. Es gibt da noch andere psionische Programme, die daran arbeiten, irgendwie scheinbar jemand emotional zu touchen, auch mit diesen oder mittels dieser Objekte gegebenenfalls und so weiter. Und ich glaube, da liegt er genau richtig mit seiner Analyse, dass er da selber wahrscheinlich zu einem Versuchsobjekt geworden ist, dass man an ihm bestimmte Experimente dieser Art eben ausgeführt hatte, und dann tauchten auch psionische Teams auf, die das scheinbar sich so ein bisschen angeschaut haben, randweise. Reden mussten die mit ihm nicht. Die sind sehr wohl in der Lage, können auch viele medial begabte Okkultisten und spirituelle Menschen die Energie auslesen und zu erkennen, in welcher Verfassung jemand ist und so weiter. Und das werden die bei ihm auch auf Distanz sofort erkennen können, was mit ihm los ist, wie weit es bei ihm angekommen ist oder nicht und so weiter. Und das, was er sagt, ist, dass es irgendwie keine extraterrestrische Intelligenz scheinbar dahinter war, nach seinem Eindruck, sondern dass das eben künstlich über das Objekt mehr kommt. Und dazu erwähnt er eben, dass da auch psionische Teams dabei waren und danach aufgetaucht sind. Und ebenso, dass es solche Programme gibt, die sich mit genau diesen Sachen befassen und so weiter. Und nach meinem Eindruck hat er das selber schon alles richtig eingeordnet dazu. Nur was dann etwas widersprüchlich ist, ist, dass er davon geleitet wird. Also erstens sitzt er da mit groß aufgerissenen Augen die ganze Zeit, so als wäre er unter einem Koffeinschock. Und dazu sagt er, er wird von diesem Objekt mehr oder weniger immer noch getoucht oder eben angeleitet. So, wenn es aber keine extraterrestrische Intelligenz ist, was ist es dann bitte? Ja, also nach meiner Anschauung ist es tatsächlich so, dass er da ja, ein Testobjekt ist und man an ihm diese Experimente eben ausführt, ihn eben durch psionische Teams mittels dieser Technik eben zu berühren und zu simulieren und so weiter. Ja. Er selber sagt auch, das ist eigentlich nur irgendwie eine Art Frequenz. Ja, und so, dass sich das irgendwie widerspricht. Einmal eine tiefergehende spirituelle Erfahrung und dann wieder alles technische Komponenten, psionische Teams und so weiter. Das ist für mich deutlich ungereimt, die ganze Sache. Ja, etwas stimmt daran nicht, wie er das so erklärt und wie da eben die hinteren Zusammenhänge dann sich auch noch darstellen. Entweder eben ist das menschengemacht und er wird einfach nur manipuliert im gewissen Rahmen. Ja, das können auch Okkultisten heute. Das ist alles überhaupt null Neues. Ja, und auf der anderen Seite ist es halt so, dass er meint, dass das irgendwie plötzlich doch irgendwas scheinbar Intelligentes und so Übernatürliches wäre, dass das ja doch irgendwie scheinbar von auswärts von Extraterrestrischen kommen müsste. Und das widerspricht sich vorn und hinten. Einmal die Erfahrung, wie er es schildert, als total spirituell und hin und her. Auf der anderen Seite sagt er, ja, das ist irgendwie nur eine Frequenz, es ist nur technisch, es sind psionische Teams dabei, es gibt Projekte in dieser Richtung und so weiter. Und ja, wie gesagt, meines Erachtens hat er damit schon alles eigentlich dazu gesagt. Ja, nur widerspricht sich das dann wieder als etwas überspirituelles und sonst was dann hinzustellen. Das mag zwar ihn berührt haben und vielleicht wurde er auch energetisch etwas geöffnet, ja, durch diesen Einfluss. so dass dann eben verschiedene Emotionen und sonst was alles nachfließen konnten oder eben einfließen konnten, in dem Sinne, wie er sich auf was auch immer konzentriert. Man kann ihn leicht simulieren, sich auf seine Mutter zu konzentrieren und ihm dann eben diese Gefühle vermitteln von Geborgenheit zum Beispiel. Und aber was auffällig ist, er sagt nicht, ich habe die Erfahrung, komischerweise, ja, irgendwie eine weibliche Energie dahinter. Andererseits denkt er an seine Mutter, an seine Frau und sonst was alles, seine Kinder oder Tochter. Und dann, wen wundert's, dass er da irgendwie eine weibliche Energie wahrnimmt. Also wenn er sich da auf die Mutter oder auf die Frau oder sonst wen ausrichtet, in dem Moment, wo er vielleicht so eine spirituelle Öffnung, sage ich mal, hat, ja, dann kommt diese Energie auch da rein und dann nimmt er das wahr, konzentriert sich darauf, wird vielleicht auch stimuliert, manipuliert sogar ein Stück weit und dann macht er so eine Erfahrung. Aber was sagt es letztlich über Extraterrestrische aus und so weiter? Eigentlich in dem Fall wohl nichts.
What did you discover the psionics were being used for in the program?
In the program, there was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps UAP could be summoned, could be communicated with, could be controlled, and could be persuaded to land, all by deploying people with psionic abilities to interface and communicate with the UAP.
And did you see that happen?
Yes, I did.
So there were people who were purportedly psionically gifted who were brought into the program.
Yes, there were.
Where did they come from?
They come from all over. They're not, and all over, I mean, from outside the United States as well as in.
But I've spoken myself to people of Native American background, Indigenous Americans, who say that this is a particularly popular thing for recruitment from the program to happen in Indigenous American communities.
Yes, I know that for a fact.
There are also people from countries in the third world where these abilities are recognised and not treated with stigma as we do in the Western world.
Yeah, there is no stigma. In fact, if there's any stigma, if you're the one who's not playing along, you might be the outcast in those cultures.
So the irony is that part of your discovery inside the program is that there genuinely are people who can actually make a mental, spiritual connection to a technology.
Yes, 100%.
Das erwähnte Stigma zum Thema eben Telepathie, Spiritualität und so weiter, das besteht eigentlich vor allem, sag ich mal, in Deutschland, Europa etwas, Amerika und so weiter. Je mehr man in andere Länder geht, die nicht dieser Art von westlicher Zivilisation, sag ich mal, angehören, umso eher kommt man dann dahinter, dass Spiritualität für die völlig normal ist. Es gibt zum Beispiel, vielleicht mache ich dazu auch nochmal eine Sendung, in Russland eine Sendung, die heißt Extra Sense. Und die haben dann extra richtige Okkultisten dort, die sich gegenseitig auch teilweise sogar bewerten und eben auch sagen, was sie selber wahrnehmen dazu. Aber vor allem, die bekommen Aufgaben gestellt und messen sich untereinander. Das heißt, die werden irgendwo in ein Dorf geschickt, wo irgendwas vorgefallen ist, Todesfälle oder sonst was Übermäßiges, Übernatürliches zum Beispiel. Und dann versuchen die zu ermitteln, was dort ist. Und so weiter. Also das ist für die eigentlich völlig normal, dass es übernatürliche Sinne gibt und so weiter. Also das, was man immer noch hier irgendwie thematisieren muss, scheinbar in Deutschland als irgendwas Unnatürliches in diesem Sinne, ist in vielen anderen Ländern völlig normal und natürlich. Da wird kein Stigma drum gemacht. Ja? Und das ist auch in Russland mit vielen dieser Sachen, weil ich da so ein bisschen Verbindung zu habe und da kann ich sagen, ja, also da ist es was ganz anderes, mit diesen Themen umzugehen. Da wird sogar angenommen, dass auch Präsidenten und so weiter, also verschiedene Persönlichkeiten in bestimmten Positionen, selber Okkultisten oder so gesehen Hexen beschäftigen, um auf sich zum Beispiel aufzupassen. Oder gewisse Angriffe abzuwehren, Manipulationen abzuwehren und so weiter. Das ist an sich gar nicht so unnormal und wie man sieht auch im Hintergrund dieser Dienste von Übersee und so weiter auch was völlig Normales. Aber für die Massen, ja, was gilt da? Eben, dass das alles Hokuspokus weitestgehend ist und eben nicht für allzu ernst zu nehmen wäre. Und das ist ein Riesenfehler, weil das schlichtweg die Grundlage von sehr, sehr vielen Zusammenhängen ist, an die man dann nicht mehr rankommt, sondern wo man dann einfach immer wieder nur an materiellen Themen hängen bleiben wird und nicht die Zusammenhänge fassen kann. Das gehört schlichtweg dazu, eine gewisse spirituelle Bildung und so weiter.
Let's go through the psionic program. When a psionic operator engages with technology, how do they do it?
Using their mind, something like meditation. And I need to preface this by saying this is stuff that I've come to know recently. The night that I had this experience, there was another team involved, come to find out was a psionics team, and they were also working that night.
And do you think it was them that had attracted the object in the first place?
Yeah, I do.
And so how did the object come to land?
I think it was invited to land by the psionics team.
Is that always how they make the objects land?
No, there's a number of other ways. So I have to tell you that weapon systems are tested out there.
I know this from other sources. I know that high pulse microwave weapons are being used to bring down some of these craft.
Yes.
Now, how often was it done where the objects would land on their own accord, and how often was it done that weapons would be used?
Yeah, I can't tell you how often. I can tell you they are brought down both ways, that they are invited to land by the psionics team. Other times they are invited in by the psionics team, but then HPMs, which are high-powered microwave weapons, are deployed, and they have an effect where they can disrupt the flight pattern of the object, and when it is an object, sometimes it's not, and it can result in that aircraft being forcibly brought down.
When they did the attraction of the objects, was it purely psychic, or was there machinery that was used as well?
So there's 5 components to our operation, which might answer a lot of your questions. So the first component is a calling phase. Calling is either through man or machine-based summoning systems. We have man-based systems, which are our psionic assets, which make a connection through intuition or consciousness with the object and can invite it in. The other is a machine-based calling system, which uses many systems, which I'm not going to go into detail about. You could refer to them as a dog whistle or a lure. And UAP, certain types seem to be specifically attracted or responsive to our machine-based calling systems. And then from there, once they're brought in, we communicate with them. Now, the psionics can have a dual role, because in this communication phase, we do a lot of data collection. So it's verifying that what we are seeing is something tangible, also that it is responding to our efforts. So we might invite it to move left or right, or to position our particular machine-based systems in a particular direction, and then measure the response.
The implication of what you're saying is that this intelligence that's behind these objects, whatever it is, seems willing to share.
Yeah, I think it ultimately is working for us. And it is commonly talked about that what we are getting, even when we weaponize it, is a donation. A gift. And even when we deploy equipment, when there's a combined operation with a psionics team and a machine-based team, all the equipment kind of has to be blessed and brought in when it's a psionically led operation for summoning.
Das ist doch unfassbar, oder? Was ein Jake Barber hier aussagt, ist Folgendes. Wenn wir mit den Außerirdischen irgendwie in Kontakt treten und wir sie dazu nicht bewegt bekommen, freiwillig zu landen und ihre Schiffe als Geschenk zu übergeben, dann versuchen wir sie sowohl mental zu verwirren, telepathisch zu manipulieren und mit unseren Waffen abzuschießen. Und wenn wir sie auch abgeschossen haben, dann ist es immer noch ein Geschenk für die Menschheit. Was anderes kann es ja auch nicht sein. Sicherlich sehen das auch die beschossenen und abgeschossenen, gestorbenen und so weiter Außerirdischen genauso. Sie sind hergekommen, um sich als Geschenk der Menschheit darzubringen. Das ist die Aussage von Jake Barber. Ohne mit den Augen zu blinzeln oder mal mit den Wimpern irgendwas zu zucken, haut man so eine Sache raus und stellt es hin, als wäre es eine völlig normale, die normalste Sache auf der Welt. Wenn es fortgeschrittene Zivilisationen sind, die teilweise weiter sind als wir, sonst würden ja nicht herkommen, sondern wir zu ihnen fliegen in der Regel, dann ist es halt die Frage, ob sie das genauso sehen, ob sie sich selber auch als Geschenk ansehen, selbst wenn sie einfach abgeschossen werden. Ja, ich meine, vielleicht werden sie sonst versehentlich vorbeigeflogen, ja, und wollten ja eigentlich ihr Geschenk abgeben. Also müssen wir natürlich nachhelfen, damit das nicht passiert, dass sie versehentlich auch nur vorbeifliegen hier an der Erde. Wenn sie schon die Reise hermachen, um sich als Geschenk darzubringen. Man muss es ihnen nur deutlich machen, warum die eigentlich überhaupt hergeflogen sind, weil vielleicht wissen die das nicht, dass sie eigentlich hergekommen sind, um uns Geschenke zu machen. Dieses allein müsste eigentlich einen riesen Aufschrei in der Menschheit verursachen. Dass man Zivilisationen, die vielleicht auch unsere Vorgängerzivilisationen so gesehen sind, abschießt und sagt, vielen Dank für euer Geschenk an uns. Das ist total lieb. Und das muss man sich nur mal klar machen. Also wie viel Empathie muss abhanden gehen, dass man das so nicht erkennt, was diese Aussage bedeutet. Also entweder kann ich da eine gewisse, wie soll man sagen, Soziopathie nur dann diagnostizieren, oder es ist bewusst so hingestellt, damit Menschen sich damit auseinandersetzen und mal selber in diese Denkart kommen, zu fragen, hey, ist das eigentlich okay, da einfach fortgeschrittene Zivilisationen zu beschießen? Was ist, wenn die vielleicht mal zurückschießen? Kann man dann sagen, endlich die Alien-Invasion, da sind die Bösen, wir müssen uns noch weiter bewaffnen. Oder was soll daraus resultieren? Ja, es ist eine nationale Bedrohung, wie manche Whistleblower da, falls es welche überhaupt sind, wie ein Luis Elizondo oder sowas, immer wieder vorkauen den Menschen. Und was sagt ein Elizondo zum Beispiel? Er sagt auch, das sind alles unbekannte Flugobjekte, die daherkommen, auch Drohnen und so weiter. Es gibt keine menschengemachten Objekte dieser Art und so weiter. Entweder lügt da Jake Barber, Dr. Stephen Greer und viele andere, oder vielleicht ein Elizondo dahingehend. Das muss sich jeder selber überlegen, wem er da welches Vertrauen schenkt oder welche Ausrichtung er da weiter nachläuft.
From what your experience shows is that whatever and wherever the intelligence is that's behind those craft, it seems friendly, benevolent.
Benevolent, yeah.
In fact, loving?
Loving. It's, if you want to connect with it, if you want to have a relationship, and if you want to see stuff flying in the sky, you need to be channeling a loving energy.
I find that quite beautiful.
Yeah, it is. In fact, there can be individuals in the group that throw off that vibe, that can mess up the vibration of the psionics work and their communication with the beings, and then you aren't as successful.
Have you, in any of the work that you've done, and I know you're being very limited in what incidents you're prepared to talk about, have you ever come across malevolent intelligence that's non-human?
I have not. I personally have not.
Have any of your colleagues?
You'll have to ask them.
Okay.
Laut Barber haben scheinbar die psionischen Teams nur sehr mäßigen oder wenig Erfolg, so wie er das schildert. Also wir können dann gleich anschließend von Dr. Stephen Greer was in der Richtung anschauen, wie er da so seine Erfahrungen in der Richtung gemacht hat. Und ich würde sagen, da haben andere scheinbar deutlich mehr Erfolg damit. Woran das wohl liegen mag? Also ich meine, vielleicht sind die auswärtigen Besucher doch nicht so blöde, um die Gesinnung nicht zu erkennen, die sich hinter diesem oder jenem verbirgt.
Anyone who's had actual contact with the ETs, NHI consciousness, including these special forces guys, they speak of it in the opposite direction. Now, On the other end of it, so let me put this in perspective. I have been doing CE5 contact for 51 plus years. Never been injured, never had a bad experience. I have been on expeditions with thousands of people that I've led all over the world. We've had the most beautiful experiences. No one's ever been injured. But there are many, many people who've been healed. You look at the CE Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind movie, and Ed Moen. He had since he was a teenager, he couldn't hear at all, barely, even with hearing aids. And when we had that contact with what the ET, we can put this picture of up called the healer. And then he continued to connect to that being throughout the night. He woke up the next morning totally healed because he didn't go there to be healed. He was there sincerely as an ambassador. We call these people ambassadors to the universe. But at the end of the night, he had to go to bed. And it became this beautiful red light sphere. And he asked, could you do something with I just can't hear what Dr. Greer's saying and what the group's saying. The next morning, he woke up completely healed. Now, I can tell you a dozen stories like that more over the years. So far from being injured, the CE5 participants have often, not that they're going there for that ulterior selfish purpose, but they often will, if they're in a pure enough heart and they make that connection with the ETs, they will have extraordinary hearing. I mean, we're talking people with, I had one man who had multiple back surgeries, chronic debilitating back pain for all of his adult life. And we were in the circle doing the meditation. There was this beautiful ET vehicle that transdimensionally enveloped us. And that night, he was healed, never had any back problems. We had a member of our team who had a really bad knee. And one night after we had been out, and this was a couple years ago in Joshua Tree, and she was in her room after we had our post CE5, what we call conviviality and babitas. And we have I call it our circle of love and dysfunction, where we have a little party at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. You know this, Michael. I mean, I like to have fun. If you don't have fun doing this, you're going to eat your gun. It's that simple. So, and so she, late at night, she said there had been earlier that night these 2 ETs, you can see a picture of it, that looked like these conehead ETs sitting in our chairs. We'd gone inside because it was so cold. It was like 18 degrees in Joshua Tree. It was this freak cold front that came through. So that night at the end, she said she connected to in consciousness telepathically to those ETs and said, God, my knee is really killing me. And all of a sudden there were 3 beautiful blue spheres that were outside her patio door from her room. And they came in. And then she was almost like put in sort of a peaceful anesthesia. And she said she just laid down and went to sleep. And when she woke up the next morning, they had done some kind of work on her knee, and it was totally fixed. So I could tell you the story. We don't have enough time to tell you all these stories.
In dem Fall ist natürlich auch die Frage, warum es überhaupt zu Abschüssen kommt, wenn die so fortgeschritten sind. Sicherlich, man hat ja inzwischen Waffen von denen selbst ja geborgen und wendet diese gegen sie an. Aber auch Dr. Stephen Greer wurde mal diese Frage gestellt und er hat da wie folgt geantwortet.
Capture these craft, or as they say, summon them. We don't summon ET craft or NHI craft. We invite them. It's a diplomatic protocol. It's not a forced military invasive effort. So the consciousness behind it is totally 180 degrees different from these programs that have been used to capture these craft and bring them down, take control. Basically, you're hijacking the control systems of these craft, bringing them within range, and then hitting them with an electromagnetic pulse weapon and a scalar weapon that then causes them to crash or come down. Sometimes in a controlled descent, so they're intact. Sometimes they crash into smithereens. So I know all the details of this. All right,
Dr. Greer,
yeah.
How could a super advanced ETI step into this trap?
Oh, great question. Here's the reason why. I remember when I was asked back in the early 90s by some Clinton folks, if they're that advanced, how could we possibly have tricked them and done this? I said, because they're not gods. They're people. They make mistakes. Now, what is our kill rate? Kill rate meaning out of attempts to kill them, how often does it happen? It's very, very low. The one of the sites I was at in Jake Barber's helicopter, he said, well, this one site, we bring down 1 or 2 a year. But there are a lot more than that are embedded within trans-dimensional space-time that are around the Earth. So it isn't as if it's like an everyday occurrence, but it means that, let's say that you have a small craft like that. There are 3 or 4 ETs or NHI people, EBINs, they used to be called, extraterrestrial biological entities. And, they're asleep at the wheel but something happens where they take their eyes or minds off what's going on and they're in sort of a rest mode, and boom, in comes this invasive signal that is a combination of conscious thought with very advanced technology in the quantum entangled universe. We're going to need to do multiple podcasts on this for people to get their minds around it. But that is the foundation of the CE5 contact initiatives, which is Jake Barber and his people very much want to validate to the public that this is based on real science. This is based on real events. And if you look at the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, you'll see that. I mean, we've had up close and personal meetings with ETs that teleport in right near in our circle of doing CE5. You'll see the pictures of them in the movie. Now, this has been known in the intelligence community.
Are operated remotely. In the off chance that there's a disconnect between the operating system or the transmitting side and the receiving side within these craft, it's called a link loss. And when that happens, our man-made systems are designed to RTB, or return to base, or they can go to designated landing sites in a link loss. So that same system would be deployed, because commonly what happens with a psionic asset who is using a form of intuition and consciousness to connect with a craft, there's a disconnect, we call it, which is like link loss. I can tell you, when we run exercises using the psionic assets in an intentional environment to get samples to the ground, we intentionally disconnect the psionic asset so that the HPM systems can be energized, because there are some potential issues that can happen if the psionic asset is still connected to the craft when it's hit with an EMP or other HPM.
I'm told part of their consciousness can stay in the craft.
Yeah. It seems to be the case that the human being can suffer some form of cognitive injury by still being connected to that craft when that craft is de-energized.
Auch zu den Teams sagt Dr. Greer, ja, es gibt da Bergungsteams. Manche sind eher darauf spezialisiert, eben eigene Flugobjekte, die irgendwo abstürzen, zu bergen. Und dazu gehört eher das Team von dem Jake Barber dazu. Und dann gibt es da andere Teams, die eher darauf spezialisiert sind, auswärtige Objekte zu bergen. Und da gibt es durchaus mal Konflikte, dass man da eventuell die falschen Teams oder beide ranzieht und ähnliche Geschichten. Aber unabhängig dessen gibt es da vielleicht doch noch viel mehr Parteien oder zumindest eine größere Partei noch hinter allem.
The implications, though, of what you're telling us are incredible. We are not alone.
We are not alone.
There is a non-human intelligence that has been engaging with this planet.
Yes.
To your knowledge, is it just the United States that is having these encounters?
No. And after doing this for 20 years, that's enough for me, because everything that I've done up until now is I've been very well taken care of, and everything, I trust the process by which we operate. So I'm only preloading it that way, because that wasn't the case by the end of this operation. For the first time in my career, by the end of this operation, we began asking questions we've never asked, which is, who are we working for, what is going on, and why did it turn out to be that there were two seemingly adversarial parties trying to employ us to go after these HVTs.
Do you believe people have been hurt or killed as a result of attempts to protect the secrecy of this whole venture?
Yeah, it is my understanding and belief that unfortunately that is true.
People have been murdered.
That seems to be the case. Members of Congress, particularly the Senate Intelligence Committee, the monitor for the CIA, and plead my case and ask for help. So we started there. And unfortunately, that was a very disheartening experience because me going there, asking for their help, very quickly turned into them asking for my help.
You're kidding?
No. Which was extremely disappointing, to say the least. But they were scared. They were scared, and they were running into their own problems of being in fear of, they were being harassed, and they were afraid for their own personal safety.
So people investigating this UAP legacy program for Congress were feeling threatened.
They were feeling threatened. And other people they were speaking to as sources were being threatened. And so they very quickly, after learning who I was, began asking me for personal protection and for strategies to mitigate threat.
But you're not getting the help you need.
No, I'm like, I came to you. So that pretty much was a devastating moment where I'm like, shoot, we're all alone.